Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to the Chat Show, where we talk about empathy, employment, and innovation every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Uh, Today's guest is a very special someone from the organization that means so much to Rangam and personally myself and Hetal on so many levels. Um, one of the I would say let me highlight three amazing things about this organization, which I have just learned from Derek. One is serving. This organization is serving 1 billion people every single day, over 133 years of rich heritage carrying for people globally, with over 140,000 employees globally. So, with that introduction to our today's guest is a director, a global category lead at Johnson and Johnson. With that introduction, Derek, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Nish. Thank you. It's an honor to represent J&J and for the discussion today. And I would say, you've had a number of thought leaders, on your show on a weekly cadence, and certainly a privilege to represent J&J today.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. So, Derek, just tell us a little bit about you, and we always talk about when we talk about J&J Credo, which is just a amazing message to the world. So, please share some of your a little bit about your introduction and background and J&J Credo.
Yeah, sure. So maybe I'll start with Johnson and Johnson. So, and thank you for the nice
Sure.
intro, Nish. So yeah, so J&J, we always kid it's a 130 plus year startup in the making. And so, as you mentioned, quite a rich history, and started by the three Johnson brothers, and Robert Wood Johnson and his two brothers James and Edward. And really, the company's starting days were around producing antiseptic, surgical, um, you know, type of tissues and sutures, if you will, and really kind of for the first time mass producing and supporting products around sterile surgery, right, for the first time, and that's really how J&J started, right, as a healthcare company, and as you mentioned today, has grown into the largest healthcare company, in the world with incredible reach and breadth. And so, if you think of J&J, most often folks will talk about our credo. And I know, Nish, this is something that you're very familiar with because we've spoken about it as well. But really, everything we do at J&J, whether it be a daily, decision or a very large type of initiatives, all centers around our credo. And the J&J credo is a document that was written about 70 years ago, by Robert Wood Johnson, the son of our founder, and really still today outlines our guiding principles, right, for how we work. And we'll get into a little bit of how we think about inclusion and how that document speaks to this as well.
Great. So thank you for sharing. And yes, at Rangam we are so proud serving J&J. Our relationship goes back over 15 years plus. Where and in fact J&J was one of our first customer in the and partnership on the MSP program, serving for contingent workforce related offerings. So we are very proud, and more importantly, what we have learned from J&J and this partnership in last, to be exact, 18 years has been just an amazing journey. Now, with that size of the organization, and with 140,000 employees globally, with so much rich best practices and processes in place, starting a new idea, that can be always very difficult or challenging, or needs a very unique number one personality, which we have learned that you have, that which you go out and pitch and share some of your idea. So when you are dealing with a large organization, how do you really influence or bring the idea of change in such a large global organization like Johnson and Johnson?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. It's a good topic to discuss, Nish. And so, I think a couple thoughts. So first of all, certainly when we think about inclusion and we think about individuals with diverse abilities, change needs to be led at the center. And
Mhm.
if you think about diverse abilities in our program that we're building, this is a program that spans across multiple functions at J&J, multiple business units and geographies, right? And
Mhm.
I think a couple things became critical. First is to have a single source of truth,
Mhm.
and that being the team that I have the privilege to work with, and then myself as the lead of that program at Johnson and Johnson, and then also operating with a global and company-wide mandate, right, to bring about that change. And I would say, how do you get there? It's probably two things. The first is, Nish, it's always operating, at a large company like ours with incredible transparency. And what I mean
Mhm.
by that is, leveraging technology as well as data, right? That gives us the ability to define what our needs are, where we're going, and effectively, make that case for change, to an
Mhm.
organization. And then lastly, I'd say is nothing at J&J in a big way happens without incredible executive sponsorship and leadership, right?
Mhm.
And you can attest to that. And so in our case here for the Diversibilities program we're going to talk about here in a minute, Len DeCandia is our sponsor. He's our chief procurement officer at Johnson and Johnson. He's also the executive sponsor of our Alliance for Diversibilities employee resource group. So we couldn't
Mhm.
ask for a stronger sponsor to help lead the program.
No, that is. But what is? How do you sell the idea, right? I'm pretty sure you must have. It's a process, and a lot of times, you must have brought in so many. So you start with something, but I'm pretty sure you are kind of expanding that into. So just a little bit of more.
Yeah, sure. So I would say if you think of our Diversibility program, right? And we think about that program in a global scale and something that is quite sustainable, right?
Mhm.
And at J&J, we're blessed in a sense that we have incredible passion around this topic, right? So at Johnson and Johnson, we have over 2,000 employees that are members of our Alliance for Diversibilities resource employee resource
Mhm.
group, right?
Yeah.
So you've got a real opportunity here to take that passion and focus it, on the right priorities. Um, and I would say, second, I'd probably just comment on leaning on the J&J Credo, like I said, which outlines our guiding principles and certainly is our North Star at J&J, Johnson and Johnson. It helps us ensure that the change we're seeking
Mhm.
really aligns to the goals and responsibilities for those stakeholders, right? And Nish, I know this is obviously a document you know well, and the spirit that accompanies it, right? And
Mhm.
um, and it's something that's really critical to have it anchored in that strong foundation.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah. So Derek, once we get the buy-in and we get the sponsors, the next step is how do we plan? So when building a program to support talent with diverse ability, um, uh, how do you plan early, right? Because that is the key early for scalable and sustainable outcomes. And I'll just add some of our thoughts and our observations in this area is the scalability and sustainability. We have seen a lot of initiatives, in silos within the organization, including at J&J and all other organizations. But when you as a leader, when you are taking the lead and planning for more scalable and sustainable global outcomes, how do you do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think it Nish, it really centers around, you know, um, anchoring it in the broader mission of the company, right?
Mhm.
And specifically within your diversity and inclusion, objectives, right? So
Mhm.
for example, um, J&J Johnson& Johnson just published our second, diversity inclusion impact review, right?
Mhm.
And in there we outline, three clear objectives of what we're looking to achieve, right? And the first being advancing a culture of inclusion and innovation. The second being building, the diverse workforce of the future, and the third being, enhancing, our business performance and reputation, right? And so, as you start to think about the opportunity to launch a program focused on individuals with disabilities and bringing that talent in a sustainable way, it really needs to fall within the larger organization and our larger missions within diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, and we always say, right, that we start small, and I have heard this from you so many times. We start small, we plan big, and that's exactly how some of the planning needs to be, which planning takes place when we are working and collaborating on this type of any thoughts on the planning, or any tips or advice based on your experience, how you have been planning for a more global impact through this
Yeah, I think
program?
I think one area that's a standout niche, and a clear early success story is, leaning on and collaborating with your external partners and suppliers to innovate with you, right?
Hmm.
And at Johnson and Johnson, we view, they're not just suppliers, they're our business partners.
Hmm.
And we're very intentional in that naming. And we think that that group can be a differentiating source of innovation, right, Nish?
Hmm.
And your
Hmm.
company is a great example of that as well. And I think to do that, we're typically very transparent and upfront on what we're looking to achieve, both for our business and for our culture,
Hmm.
with those supplier partners. And I think that is a big step forward in the right direction. I think that the second piece I leave you with was, certainly over the past few years, and this has been for many years, we recognize at Johnson & Johnson that given our scale, as you mentioned, and certainly our reach around the world, that, we have the ability and, quite honestly, the responsibility at times to think quite differently, about
Hmm.
diversity and inclusion. And we're in
Hmm.
that unique position, and we recognize, that responsibility, and look forward to the opportunity to lead, some of those conversations.
No, this is great, and like with your background in HR and sourcing, strategic sourcing. So what do you mean by innovation and that partnership with the suppliers? If you can just tell us a little bit about your thoughts on how you look at the supplier and how you partner with suppliers for innovation.
Yeah, sure. Great, great. So if you think about our company, we have a very rich supply base, of over 70,000 suppliers globally, right?
Wow.
And so it's a lot of partners, and there's just incredible thought leadership and knowledge in that supply base, and ultimately those business partners, right?
Mm.
And so much of the history of innovation of J&J, and what we think our future as well looks like, is built upon that collaboration, niche. And I always say, we don't have a monopoly on good ideas just within the four walls of Johnson and Johnson. And that's really goes back to our credo, right? If you think
Yeah.
about our credo in the first paragraph of it, it talks about how to partner with our suppliers and our business partners in the external community, and is very clear when it speaks about how that relationship should take form. So I think for a lot of it, Nish, just comes back to that, and how we think about treating one another and working with one another.
Yeah, no, and we have, in fact, we have at Rangam, we have that experience at every step in our partnership with J&J. So we thank you for just amazing partnership, and taking the lead, and really empower local businesses and diverse suppliers like us. So we thank you. We thank you for that. So once you identify the idea and get engagement with all the stakeholders, and now you have some partners, the next real um, task is execution, 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 and so how do you or who do you see when it comes to execution? See as accountable when you are dealing with the uh, complexity of this workforce strategy and in inclusion, as we all know, it's even though every one of us is connected to someone with disability, we all have good intentions to help them with the getting them with the meaningful job. It is complex. So how do you um, make and bring in people with accountability as part
Yeah.
of your?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Nish, because if you look at other programs in the past, this is many times where they have challenges, right, and hit
Mhm,
roadblocks. So I think at Johnson and Johnson, if you think about these concepts, just like you talked about, when you think about um, you know advancing a culture of inclusion,
mhm,
or you think about the concept of a diverse workforce for the future, you know, those are concepts that are relevant for all members of our workforce at J&J, whether they be employees, whether they be contractors, contingent workers. Every member of the workforce is expected to think about those
mhm,
topics, and at all levels, right? So
mhm.
when you use the word accountability, which is the right word, I think it's everyone is accountable.
Yeah.
I think it would be a misnomer if you think about, historically, or gone are the days of thinking about diversity and inclusion just within the HR function. I think that has come and gone. I think every team member, every part of the workforce is expected, to make diversity and inclusion, part of how they work each and every day. Yes.
Mhm,
So if you come at the challenge with that mindset,
mhm,
it becomes quite easier to build accountability because it's already woven in then to the fabric of your culture.
mhm.
And it becomes more about specification, measuring, right, and taking that passion I mentioned earlier and focusing it in the right directions.
So, and during this execution phase, Derek, some of the experience, if you can share, what are the hurdles you have experienced and challenges you have faced, and how do you, overcome some of those challenges? Because some of the viewers are really looking for some of those tips and some advice, because everyone is kind of trying to figure out, and what we have learned. And sorry, I'll let you answer that, but I just want to put some thought in it. What we have learned that Johnson and Johnson is always 5 to 10 years ahead of the curve. That's how we have seen in every angle when it comes to the workforce and holistic workforce building strategies. So, um, uh, share your thoughts and any advice. How do you really start executing on your ideas and your strategy?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Nish. So you know, I would say, corporations, certainly Johnson and Johnson alike, are in a place to drive the conversation, along with others, when it comes to expanding diversity and inclusion, and specifically to support individuals and talent with disabilities. And I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts, right? So the first is I think some of it is demonstrating a successful model, right? And a
Mm-hmm.
firm believer that success breeds more success. So, what is it? Do you have the ability to recruit, hire, and retain, incredible talent with diverse abilities?
Mm-hmm.
And that works for all stakeholders, right, that are
Mm-hmm.
involved in that. I think the other thought I would leave you with is it's very beneficial to remove the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're doing something for the first time or change at an individual level, providing capabilities and accessibility to thought leadership, and training and resources for whether these be J&J managers or individuals with disabilities or the talent, mentoring and buddies, it really has a significant impact. And recognizing that that is what's needed in some cases. right, to
Hmm.
make this successful. And lastly, I'll just leave you with a thought here is some of it is leading by example. So we're in a unique position given our breadth and scale. And if we can lead by example, we can kind of shift the thought of the default position being an inclusive position, right? Within society and certainly within, the workforce as well.
No, that is so true and so powerful. That fear of unknown, we have heard it so many times. In some cases, we have heard that from hiring manager who has a personal connection. They'll say, if I need this support, what do I do, right? And it is so if we or if the program can handle, and if we have put enough thought and planning in place and processes in place, so when there is a need of providing any support, so that is very very powerful. Second thing is, which you mentioned, which is so important, leading by example. And we have seen that, we have experienced that when we are building this type of programs, some of the things which is very critical and can be very helpful on a long run. And you touched upon a little bit on the societal impact, creating shared value. Tell us a little bit about, and I know J&J is big, so share some of your thoughts on how, with the goal of making our society more inclusive home for people with diverse ability. What role do you see corporations like J&J and others are playing?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nish. And I think you've noticed probably over the last, several years, large corporations or companies starting to develop points of view on some
Mhm,
topics such as inclusion and diversity, right?
mhm,
And I think without question, there is a role to play, right?
mhm,
So some of it goes back to leading by example, Nish. I think there's a
mhm,
point there. It also goes back to, certainly at Johnson and Johnson with our, leveraging our credo, we have a commitment to the communities for which we work and live.
mhm,
And that commitment comes to life in many different ways. And one of them being creating communities that are inclusive, Nish.
mhm,
And certainly, if you think of the power of 140,000 individuals, right,
mhm,
and their ability to impact the folks around them, right, you
mhm,
start to get um, the magnitude effect, right.
mhm,
I think that's a piece of it as well, right, and if we can be that beacon, right, of change, that's a great place to start, and there's a lot of power there. I think the other thing is, we have the opportunity and sometimes the stage, let's call it what it is, to raise awareness
mhm,
and start a conversation, right? Where maybe in the past it hadn't been, and I think certainly that's a responsibility that I think you'll
mhm,
see Johnson and Johnson and other large corporations, take on and develop that. I think long gone are those days where there was much more neutrality on these points of view. And I think it's expected by customers and patients as well as our employees to start to think about these and think about them and listen. Nish, so much of it comes to listening, right,
mhm.
from a diverse set of stakeholders to start to think about how do we advance this, forward.
Oh, that is so true, and really, your leadership, and under your leadership, what you are doing as Diversibility program, it has a huge societal impact, because, as you know, Derek, we in United States, 1 out of 5 individuals has some kind of a visible or invisible disability. So it's a huge, and only 3 out of 10, and I think about 4 out of 10 adults uh, are employed. So it's a huge unemployment. It's a huge challenge, and that societal impact is huge. So and we have been talking about few we have few minutes left. So I would like to ask you if you can share some of the incidences, some of the activities which you think has really has been challenging, but a great lesson learned. Anything you can think of, as you are making great headway
Yeah, I
to.
think I'll leave you with, a few thoughts. I think as you think about, incredible talent with diverse abilities, Nish, and thinking about how to make our, every culture and society more inclusive. I think there's clearly data and testimonial support that there's differentiated capabilities with this talent.
Mm,
And some of us that are close to it are very aware of this, but there's
mhm,
not broad awareness necessarily of that. And so I think quite a bit of it is using our platform and programs like this to gain that awareness,
mm,
and that individuals with diverse abilities bring diversity of thought, and they bring diversity of capabilities, and sometimes differentiated
mhm,
capabilities to a
mhm,
company such as Johnson and Johnson. And there's such opportunity to bring their thought leadership and help shape, our culture, and ultimately how we come to serve our patients and customers as well. And I think that's the conversation that's ahead of us, right? I think that's where you start to partner up, supply and demand, and you start to think about how do we marry them together, and make something that could be even more beneficial for all, stakeholders involved. And that's where I think the conversation really will start to go. It's already there, but starting to build that awareness of what this talent can bring to any company, and certainly a company such as Johnson and Johnson as well.
So before we conclude, um, if you can share on any positive note where you share the idea and you got a great success or a very positive response from some of the folks you are talking to, would you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah,
Because I
sure.
know you do this. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you, Nish, and we can certainly wrap up. And it's I would say, almost every day I have that type of
Yep.
example. So I'm in a privileged position to bring a voice to this great program at Johnson and Johnson with incredible partners like yourself, Nish, and I think that you will find leaders in Johnson and Johnson, because they're so ingrained in our credo, incredibly receptive to this,
Mhm.
and you will find them action oriented and
Right.
interested, right?
Right.
And what's the next step, right? And willing to lean in.
Mhm.
And I think that is something that I've found over the last year or so, as I've had the privilege to share this vision with others and have them shape it with me along the way. The reception has been incredible. And I think, that being said, it's what I expected, Nish. It,
Yeah.
it hasn't been surprising per se, because I know that the company that I come to work at each and every day. And so, and I think you would think the same. So I think, there's so many testimonials and stories, at the end of the day, though, I would leave you with, it has to really work for the talent, right, that comes to work, and their testimonials and their point of view, and as well as the managers that manage them and work with them. That's the most important to me. And if it works for those folks, then ultimately it'll work for everyone else.
No, that is so true. And Derek, really thank you for your leadership and amazing work in promoting employment. As I always say, promoting employment for everyone, inclusive of people with disability, people on the autism spectrum, and disabled veterans. So thank you for doing some amazing work and leading this space and really innovating and really executing in a way which is, as a whole, as a society and this world needs leaders like you and some of these initiatives which you are taking and really executing it. So we thank you for all your great work and leadership. So um, and of course, thank you for joining and sharing your time with us. So we thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nisha. It's been a privilege and certainly an honor. And this is a topic that you and I share a passion for, obviously, and really look forward to continuing that dialogue. So thanks. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We will continue our conversation on empathy, innovation, and employment every Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Thank you again for your time and stay safe and healthy. Thank you, everyone. And in advance, happy holidays. Um, some of us from India, we have already started celebrating holiday season with our Diwali. So happy New Year and wishing you all the best during the holiday season. Thank you.